What if the guy in charge of figuring out if UFOs are real used to build things out of light?
Well, that's,
I'm kind of where we're going today.
yeah.
We're diving deep into the work of Sean Kirkpatrick, who went from very literally, like, manipulating atoms
Right.
to leading the Pentagon's office investigating unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs. You've said it's a whole stack of stuff.
Yeah.
Research papers, patents, biographical info, and
Fascinating stuff.
it's fascinating.
What stands out to me is the sheer range of Kirkpatrick's expertise. We're talking nanotechnology, intelligence work, and now UAPs. It's quite a journey.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation.
Okay.
Kirkpatrick has a PhD in physics, but his research is, well, a bit dense. It's all about, and I'm going to try and say this, nonlinear and non-equilibrium phonon dynamics of crystals.
Right.
How do we even explain that to someone who hasn't thought about physics since high school?
Yeah. Imagine a perfectly ordered structure, like a grid of atoms in a crystal. Now throw in some impurities, which disrupt that order. Kirkpatrick was studying how those impurities affect how energy, in the form of vibrations, travels through the crystal.
Okay.
It's about understanding how materials behave at a very fundamental level.
So super tiny stuff.
Yeah.
But important if you want to build things at that scale right.
Exactly.
And he took this knowledge to the Air Force Research Lab, where he worked on ultrafast lasers. Lasers are already pretty precise.
Yeah.
So what makes them ultrafast so special?
Ultrafast lasers emit incredibly short bursts of light. We're talking femtoseconds,
Wow.
which is a millionth of a billionth of a second.
It's hard to even imagine.
This allows for an unprecedented level of control over energy and matter. Think of it like a scalpel for the microscopic world.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. And this leads us to one of Kirkpatrick's more intriguing areas of expertise.
Right.
Two-photon polymerization.
Yeah.
You sent an article from Nature that dives into this. It's almost like science fiction.
It is pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
Two-photon polymerization is a technique where you use light to build 3D structures within a material. Normally, a single photon wouldn't have enough energy to trigger a reaction, but if you hit the material with two photons simultaneously at precisely the right spot, their energy combines and boom! You can create incredibly precise structures.
They use this to, get this, replicate the optical properties of snakeskin.
Right.
Who thinks to do that and why?
Snakeskin has this unique way of scattering light that makes it appear iridescent. Kirkpatrick and his team used two-photon polymerization to create materials that mimic those properties. This has huge potential in optics.
Yeah.
Imagine coatings for lenses and sensors that can manipulate light in entirely new ways.
So we're going from manipulating atoms to building tiny snake scales with lasers.
Yeah.
That's got to be some serious outside-the-box thinking.
Definitely.
And it makes me wonder, how does this kind of background prepare you for the world of intelligence and UAPs?
That's where it gets really fascinating. This kind of research requires a high level of precision, an eye for detail, and the ability to think creatively to solve complex problems. These skills translate surprisingly well to the world of intelligence, where you're often dealing with limited information and trying to piece together a bigger picture.
And Kirkpatrick spent quite a bit of time in the intelligence community before taking on the UAP challenge.
He did.
He was a program manager at the National Reconnaissance Office, which deals with spy satellites, and then he moved to the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology.
Wow.
What kind of work was he doing there? We could probably only speculate, right?
We can speculate, but his background gives us some clues.
Yeah.
The NRO and the CIA are at the forefront of technology, and Kirkpatrick's expertise in nanotechnology and laser physics would have been highly valuable. He was likely involved in developing new sensors, imaging techniques, and who knows what other classified technologies.
Oh, right. This is where things get really interesting for me.
Yeah.
We're talking about someone who's not only a brilliant scientist,
Right.
but also has deep experience in the world of intelligence, where discerning real signals from noise is paramount.
Absolutely.
How does that kind of expertise translate to investigating UAPs?
It's crucial. Think about it. UAP investigations are all about analyzing data from various sources, often ambiguous and incomplete, and trying to figure out what's real and what's not. Kirkpatrick's background in analyzing complex data, discerning patterns, and understanding the limitations of information would be incredibly valuable in this context.
So he's bringing a whole different set of tools to the table than your average UFO enthusiast.
Right.
He's approaching it from a scientific and intelligence perspective, which is a pretty unique combination.
Exactly. And it's this perspective that led him to push for a more rigorous evidence-based approach to UAP investigations when he became the director of ATANUS.
Let's talk about ARO, because that's where Kirkpatrick's expertise really gets put to the test.
Right.
What were the challenges he faced in heading up this new office dedicated to investigating UAPs?
Well, for starters, the very nature of UAPs is elusive and often relies on anecdotal evidence. There's also the challenge of separating real UAPs from misidentified objects like drones, balloons, or even atmospheric phenomena.
Right.
And then there's the public pressure and media hype, which can often cloud the issue.
And Kirkpatrick didn't shy away from calling out these challenges, right?
No, he didn't.
I remember reading about his congressional testimony where he was pretty critical of the over-reliance on anecdotal evidence in past UFO investigations.
He was very clear that he wanted to bring a more scientific and analytical approach to the field.
Which, considering his background, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. So he wanted to bring a more scientific approach.
So we've got this laser physicist, intelligence expert now heading up the Pentagon's UAP office, pushing for a more evidence-based approach.
Right.
But how does that actually play out in practice?
That's what we'll dive into next.
Good.
Kirkpatrick and his team at AAR took a very interesting approach to analyzing UAP reports, one that focuses on the environment in which these sightings occur.
Okay, so they weren't just taking people's word for it that they saw something weird.
Right.
They were actually trying to understand the context.
Exactly. They factored in things like light pollution, cloud cover, even how much tree canopy there was in the area.
Wow.
They also looked at things like proximity to military bases and air traffic patterns.
So instead of jumping to conclusions about alien spacecraft, they were asking,
Right.
could this be a drone, a weather balloon, or just a trick of the light?
Precisely. And what they found is pretty interesting. There's a strong correlation between UAP reports and factors that improve visibility. For example, areas with low light pollution and less tree cover tend to have more UAP reports.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you can see more of the sky, you're more likely to spot something unusual, whether it's a real UAP or just a misidentified airplane.
Exactly. They also found a correlation between UAP reports and areas with high air traffic, particularly around military installations.
So does this mean that most UAPs are just misidentified aircraft?
Not necessarily. The study doesn't rule out more exotic explanations, but it does highlight the importance of considering these more mundane factors before jumping to conclusions.
This raises an important question for me. What does this tell us about how we perceive and interpret the world around us?
Right.
If our environment can influence what we think we're seeing, how do we know what's real?
It's a great question. We tend to see what we expect to see, and our brains are really good at filling in the gaps. If you're expecting to see a UFO and you see something unusual in the sky, your brain might jump to that conclusion, even if there's a more mundane explanation.
So how do we become better observers? How do we avoid these perceptual traps, especially when dealing with something as mysterious as UAPs?
I think Kirkpatrick's background offers some valuable insights here.
Yeah.
His scientific training instilled in him a healthy dose of skepticism, a rigorous approach to evidence, and a willingness to consider multiple explanations. These are all essential qualities for anyone trying to make sense of the unexplained.
It's like that saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. You don't just jump to the most exciting conclusion. You look for the most logical one based on the available evidence.
Exactly. And you don't dismiss evidence that doesn't fit your preconceived notions. You have to be open to being wrong, to having your assumptions challenged.
So when it comes to UAPs, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from Kirkpatrick's work, especially for everyday people who are just trying to make sense of all this?
I think it's this. Approach the topic with a critical but open mind. Don't just accept everything you hear or read uncritically. Look for evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and be willing to change your mind if the evidence warrants it.
It sounds like we need to apply a bit more of the scientific method to our everyday lives,
Yeah.
especially when dealing with information overload and sensationalized headlines.
Absolutely. And that applies not just to UAPs, but to any topic where there's uncertainty and a lot of speculation.
So if we see something strange in the sky,
Right.
don't immediately assume it's aliens.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, gather as much information as possible, and consider the most likely explanations before jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. And if you still can't explain it, that's okay. There's still a lot we don't know about the universe.
Right.
The mystery is part of the fun.
But let's be honest.
Yeah.
The possibility of extraterrestrial life is pretty mind-blowing, and it's hard not to get caught up in the excitement.
Right.
What are the implications of all of this for everyday people, for modern life, and for the near future?
Well, that's a question best left for the final part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, listeners, because we're about to venture into the realm of the unknown. All right, we're back, and it's time to tackle the big question. What does all this UAP talk mean for us down here on Earth?
I mean, it's exciting to think about, but are there, real-world implications?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge.
We've always looked up at the stars and wondered if we're alone, and now with so many UAP reports, that question feels more pressing than ever.
But even if some of these UAPs do turn out to be extraterrestrial, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a threat.
Right.
It could be like that Arthur C. Clarke quote, "We are either alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying."
That's a good point. The unknown can be unsettling, but it can also be a catalyst for incredible growth and discovery.
Yeah.
Imagine the scientific and technological leaps we could make if we confirm the existence of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization.
Think about it. It could revolutionize everything from physics and engineering to our understanding of consciousness and the origins of life itself.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It could also force us to reconsider our place in the cosmos. Are we just one species among many? Are there other forms of intelligence out there that challenge our very definition of what it means to be sentient?
And what about the implications for society? Would contact with an extraterrestrial civilization lead to chaos and panic? Or could it actually unite humanity in a shared sense of wonder and purpose?
That's a tough one to predict. It would depend on so many factors. The nature of the contact, the intentions of the other civilization, our own level of preparedness.
This raises an important question. Are we as a species ready for such an encounter?
Honestly, I think it's fair to say we're not quite there yet. We still struggle with so many conflicts and divisions here on Earth.
Yeah.
Our understanding of the universe is still in its infancy.
But maybe the prospect of extraterrestrial contact can serve as a wake-up call.
Yeah.
A reminder that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves and that our petty differences pale in comparison to the vastness of the cosmos.
Perhaps that's the most profound implication of all, a renewed sense of perspective, a humbling realization that we're not the center of the universe and that there's so much more out there to discover.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Sean Kirkpatrick and the science of the unexplained, what's the one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'd say this. Approach this topic, and any topic really, with a healthy balance of curiosity and skepticism. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and to consider multiple perspectives. The search for answers is often more valuable than the answers themselves. Keep looking up, keep exploring, and keep an open mind.
Those are words to live by. And on that note, we'll leave you to your own deep dives into the mysteries of the universe. Until next time, keep exploring.
I would have been on top of the charts, but it's politics. You do some gimmick shit and post, you get a lot of clicks. Drop some real shit and they probably won't acknowledge it.